Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Insights. Today, we're exploring the Federal Reserve, often called the Fed. The story of the Fed is filled with challenges, debates, and even conspiracy theories about how this organization works. It's a story of crises and solutions, showing how the United States finally created a bank to guide and protect the economy. This video will not only give you knowledge about the Fed, but it will also help you improve your English listening skills. Let's get started. Part 1. A Problem of Money Before the Fed. Before the year 1913, the United States did not have a central bank that lasted. This created a lot of problems. The country's money system was not stable. It was like a boat in a very big storm, going up and down. There were many different banks, and they all worked alone. When one bank had a problem, it could quickly cause a problem for many other banks. This was a domino effect. When one domino falls, it makes the next one fall, and so on. In the world of money, this was called a financial panic. A financial panic happened when people became afraid. People went to their bank to take out their money. They wanted to get their money in cash. But the banks did not keep all the money in cash. They used the money to give loans to other people and to businesses. So, when many people came at the same time, the bank did not have enough cash. The bank would have to close its doors. This made people even more afraid. They ran to other banks. Soon, many banks were in trouble. This was a very bad situation for everyone. Businesses could not get money. People could not get their savings. The whole economy would stop. Financial panics happened often in the United States during the 1800s and early 1900s, and they were a very big problem. Many people lost their money and their jobs. It became clear that something had to change. The country needed a better system, one that could support banks when they were in trouble and provide money in an emergency. The problem was that no single person or group had the power to stop these panics. There was no one in charge of the whole money system. It was like a big city with many small fire stations, but no one person to call when there was a big fire. The small fire stations could help with small fires, but they could not work together to stop a giant fire that was burning the whole city. The country needed a central fire station, a place that could organize everything and bring help when there was a very big problem. This idea of a central organization for money was the main reason for the creation of the Fed. The public felt the pain of these events. People who worked hard and saved their money could lose it all in just a few days. Farmers could not get loans to plant their crops. Factories could not get money to pay their workers. The economy was like a car with no brakes. It would go very fast and then crash. The crashes were very painful for everyone. This lack of a stable system showed everyone that the old way was not working. Something had to be built to protect the economy from these sudden crashes. Part 2. The birth of the Federal Reserve, 1907 to 1913. The big financial panic in 1907 was a major turning point. The panic showed everyone how weak the U.S. money system was. In that year, a banker named J.P. Morgan used his own money and his power to stop the panic. He was a very rich and powerful man. He helped the banks that were in trouble. He used his own money to give them what they needed. This stopped the panic, but people realized that a country's money system should not depend on one rich person. What would happen if a rich person was not there to help? The country needed a permanent solution. A group of men gathered in a secret place on an island called Jekyll Island. The meeting was kept quiet because many people did not support the idea of a central bank. The public was not supposed to know what was being planned. These smart men worked for many days and many weeks to create a new plan for the country's money system. Their plan became the basis for a new law. The law was called the Federal Reserve Act. It was passed in the year 1913. This law created the Federal Reserve System. The law had two main goals. The first goal was to create a stable money system. The second goal was to help the country's economy grow over time. The Federal Reserve was born. It was not a single bank. It was a system of banks. It had a main board in Washington, D.C., and it had 12 regional banks in different parts of the country. This was a good idea because it meant the power was not all in one place. The 12 regional banks were in cities like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Richmond, Atlanta, Chicago, St. Louis, Minneapolis, Kansas City, Dallas, and San Francisco. This structure made sure that the Fed understood the different economic needs of all parts of the country. The new Federal Reserve had some very important jobs. One of its main jobs was to be a lender of last resort. This means that if a bank was in trouble and could not get a loan from anyone else, it could get a loan from the Fed. This was a very important job. It meant that a financial panic could be stopped. If people were running to a bank to get their money, the bank could get a loan from the Fed to give the people their money. This would make people feel safe. They would know their money was safe and the panic would stop. The Fed was like the central fire station, ready to put out the big fire before it spread to the whole city. The Federal Reserve was also given the power to create a new, more stable money supply. Before the Fed, the amount of money in the country could change a lot, which caused problems. The Fed could now manage this. It could add more money to the system when the economy needed it, and it could take money out of the system when there was too much. This power was very new and very important. It was a big step towards a more stable economy. Part 3. The Early Years and the Great Depression, 1920s to 1930s. The Federal Reserve began its work in 1913. Its first big test was during World War I. The Fed helped the government get money for the war. It did this by buying government bonds. This was a success. After the war, the country went through a period of fast economic growth in the 1920s. The Fed was still learning how to do its job. It was still new. The economy was growing, and many people were very optimistic. Many people started to buy stocks, which are small parts of a company. The price of stocks went up and up. This was a time of great excitement, but there were also signs of trouble. The Fed saw some of these signs, but it did not take strong action. Then, in October 1929, the stock market crashed. This crash was a very big problem. It was the start of the Great Depression. The Great Depression was the worst economic time in the history of the United States. Many people lost their jobs. Many businesses closed. Many banks closed. The Fed had the power to stop the bank problems, but it did not use its power fully. When banks started to fail, the Fed did not give them loans. The Fed did not give them the money they needed. Because of this, more and more banks failed. When banks failed, people lost their savings. People became very poor. This made the Great Depression much, much worse. The Great Depression was a very big lesson for the Federal Reserve. It showed that the Fed's new powers were not enough if the leaders did not use them correctly. The leaders of the Fed in the 1930s were too afraid. They did not want to give loans to the banks. They thought it was better to let the weak banks fail. This idea was wrong. It caused the whole economy to fall down. The lessons of the Great Depression were very clear. The Fed had to be active. It had to use its powers to help the banks and to help the economy. It had to be the lender of last resort that it was created to be. The Great Depression was a very dark time for the country. Many people had no jobs and no food. The government had to pass many new laws to help. The government also gave more power to the Fed. It changed the Fed's structure to make it more centralized and more powerful. The new laws and the new power were meant to make sure that a Great Depression would never happen again. The Fed was given a much stronger role in managing the country's money and economy. It was also given the job of managing inflation and unemployment, which are two very important parts of an economy. These changes were a direct result of the big mistake the Fed made during the Great Depression. Part 4. New Powers and World War II, 1940s to 1970s. After the Great Depression, the Federal Reserve became a much stronger organization. It had more power and a clearer mission. Its first big task with this new power was to help the country during World War II. The government needed a lot of money to pay for the war, to build ships, and to make weapons. The Fed helped the government get this money. It helped by keeping interest rates low, which made it cheaper for the government to borrow money. It also helped by buying a lot of government bonds. This work was a big success. The Fed showed that it could be a powerful and helpful tool for the government in a time of great need. The war was won, and the Fed was seen as a key part of the victory. After the war, the U.S. economy was very strong. The Fed helped the country move from a wartime economy to a peacetime economy. For many years, things were good. But in the 1970s, a new problem came. This problem was called inflation. Inflation is when the price of things goes up and up. The price of food, gasolines, and everything else was getting more expensive. People's money was not buying as much as it used to. This was a very difficult problem for the Fed. The Fed had to try to stop inflation. The Fed's leaders were not sure what to do. They tried many things, but nothing seemed to work. The prices kept going up. People were worried about their money. The problem of inflation in the 1970s was very hard to solve. The Fed did not act very strongly at first. It raised interest rates, but not by a lot. It was afraid that if it raised the rates too much, it would cause a recession. A recession is when the economy slows down and people lose their jobs. The Fed had two jobs: to control prices, inflation, and to keep people working, unemployment. These two goals were sometimes in conflict. If you try to stop inflation, you might cause more unemployment. If you try to stop unemployment, you might cause more inflation. This was the big problem of the 1970s. The Fed had a big challenge, and it was struggling. The 1970s showed that the Fed's job was not easy. It had to make difficult decisions. It had to decide what was more important: controlling prices or keeping people working. The problem of inflation became so bad, it was a major concern for everyone. This period showed the Fed that it needed to act more strongly and more independently to solve big problems. The lesson of the 1970s was that sometimes the Fed had to make hard choices that might cause some short-term pain for the economy in order to have long-term health. The country needed a strong leader at the Fed to make those hard choices. Part 5: Fighting Inflation and the Modern Era, 1980s to 2008. The new strong leader came in the year 1979. His name was Paul Volcker. He was the new head of the Federal Reserve. Paul Volcker knew that inflation was a very big problem. He decided that the Fed had to stop it no matter what. He took very strong action. He raised interest rates very high. Interest rates are the cost of borrowing money. When interest rates are high, it is more expensive for businesses to borrow money. When it is more expensive to borrow money, businesses do not grow as fast. They do not hire as many people. This slows down the economy. This also helps to bring prices down. Paul Volcker's actions were very painful for his country. His high interest rates caused a recession. Many people lost their jobs. People were angry at him, but his plan worked. By the mid-1980s, inflation was gone. The prices were stable again. The Fed had won the fight against inflation. This was a very important moment in the history of the Fed. It showed that the Fed had the power and the courage to make a difficult decision to save the economy from a big problem. Paul Volcker's time as the head of the Fed is a very famous part of its history. After the fight against inflation was won, the U.S. economy had a long period of good times. The Fed was seen as a very powerful and smart organization. It was in charge of keeping the economy stable. It would raise interest rates a little when the economy was growing too fast. It would lower interest rates a little when the economy was slowing down. This work of managing the economy became known as monetary policy. The Fed used monetary policy to keep the economy healthy. It was a time of great success for the Fed and for the country. This period of stability lasted for a long time. It was called the Great Moderation. People believed that the Fed had finally learned how to manage the economy perfectly. But a new and different kind of problem was coming. In the 2000s, there were new kinds of loans and new ways of doing business. The Fed was watching, but it did not see the big problem. That was growing in the housing market. It did not see the new danger. That was coming. The period of calm and success was about to end with a very big crisis. The next big test of the Fed's power was coming, and it would be the biggest one. Part 6, The Great Recession, and Today's Challenges, 2008 to present. In 2008, the U.S. economy faced a new, very big crisis. It was called the Great Recession. The problem started with loans for houses. Many people had loans for houses that they could not pay back. This caused a big problem for the banks that gave these loans. The problem was so big that many banks were in danger of failing. This was like the financial panics of the past, but on a much, much bigger scale. The whole world's money system was in danger of crashing. The Fed had to act fast. The Fed, led by its new head, Ben Bernanke, learned from the mistakes of the Great Depression. This time, the Fed acted very, very fast and very, very strongly. It did not let the banks fail. It gave the banks a lot of money to help them. It lowered interest rates to almost zero. It also did something new. It started to buy a lot of government bonds and other things to add more money to the economy. This was called quantitative easing. The Fed was essentially creating new money to help the economy. These actions were very big and very fast. They helped to stop the financial system from crashing. The Great Recession was very painful, but many people believe it would have been much worse if the Fed had not acted so quickly and strongly. The Fed also had a major role during the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, the whole world's economy stopped because of the pandemic. The Fed acted again, very quickly and very strongly. It lowered interest rates to zero. It helped businesses get loans. It worked with the government to make sure money could keep moving. These actions helped the economy get through the pandemic. They showed that the Fed had the tools and the will to act in a big crisis. Today, the Fed faces a new challenge: inflation. After the pandemic, the prices of things started to go up again. This is a very big problem. The Fed has been working to stop inflation. It has been raising interest rates again, just like Paul Volcker did in the 1980s. These actions are meant to slow down the economy and bring prices down. The Fed has to be careful. If it raises the rates too much, it might cause a recession. If it does not raise them enough, inflation will get worse. The Fed is in a difficult position, trying to find the right balance. The history of the Federal Reserve is a story of learning. The system began because the country had no central money authority and faced constant problems. The Fed was created to solve these issues. During the Great Depression, the institution made serious mistakes, but lessons from that time shaped later actions. Those lessons guided the response during the Great Recession and the pandemic. Today, the Fed's role is more important than ever. As the central bank, it serves as the lender of last resort and manages the nation's money. Decisions made by the Fed are a key part of the U.S. economy and influence not only America, but also the entire world.